But next week on the program, Dark Side of the Ring, Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert. And I'm looking forward to this one because, again, this is going to be, we're going to see some footage that hasn't been beaten to death and overexposed. And we're going to hear Eddie's story that ended, unfortunately, about 10 years before he would be a household name now. It just right before that hot period in the 90s. So
that is
next week
interesting.
we'll do Eddie Gilbert.
That's always the big hypothetical. What would have been, people presume because Eddie was a smart guy, he would have been set up for life. He would have been great during the Monday Night War, but he had burned a lot of bridges. He was in Puerto Rico because it was the only place that would let him book. And he definitely was one of these guys that once he was Booker, he couldn't turn it off. I'm sure you could relate. Once you're doing it, it's hard to not do it when it's all you're thinking about nonstop, as he was.
And the thing is, with Eddie, with Eddie and me, the difference was I could hold blowing up for longer. Eddie would have the blow up quicker, and sometimes over stuff that in the long run might have worked out. But that's explained a lot in the in the piece.
Good.
But not only by me, but by everybody involved, because I think Dutch Mantel's on there saying, I think the longest Eddie booked anything was 6 months.
And I think,
but at the same time,
right.
Mick,
I think he's right.
Mick made the point, Mick Foley makes the point that, he would be looked at as one of the most creative minds today by that next generation that he just didn't quite make. But the thing is, on talent and creativity, would Eddie have made it anywhere? Most certainly, especially when the Attitude Era things got hot. Would Eddie have stayed anywhere long term because of his disposition? Maybe another question, and we'll let everybody form their own opinions when they watch the show.
A lot of people always compare you to Heyman, and it's a natural comparison just because of everything you guys did in the business. You started as photographers, you ended up running your own companies. But in a lot of ways, you and Eddie Gilbert is kind of the weird dichotomy to look at just because you both grew up idolizing Lawler. And
well, now hold on now. Idolizing. Oh, yes, I pray to you, King. No, our favorite wrestler besides his father.
Yeah, you both were photographers.
Because he was the guy in our he was the guy in our territory. Really, Eddie and I were more similar. We're both from the same part of the country. We both knew each other for longer than Paul and I never met till we were grown folks. But Eddie and I had a similar background in philosophy of what kind of wrestling worked or didn't work. And we did more of the same kind of stuff than either Eddie and Paul or me and Paul. Eddie and I were more similar in the wrestling product.
Like that Lawler's Army thing was a big influence on both of you.
Well, at some time or another, it becomes easier instead of buying new suits and going through dry cleaning. You just go to the fucking Army surplus store and get the goddamn.
Now, you didn't make yourself a king. He did that. He made himself a king of Philadelphia.
Yeah, no, I couldn't pull the king off, but I could be the general of the army.
I just found one last thing about this, and I am curious to see how this Eddie Gilbert thing is going to go. I wish they had included Missy Hyatt, but I understand why that may have been an issue. Also, I wish there was a better narrator for all these than Chris Jericho. He's horrible at this. But I just found in the Eddie Gilbert file, like 8x10s that were made up when he was like 14, shooting photos at rain. It's just him holding a camera, wearing a sweater in the back, and it says Eddie Gilbert. It's a professionally done 8x10.
He always knew somehow he was going to get in the wrestling business. And the difference in the two of us, because we were a month apart in age, and from the time we met, we were 14, 15 or whatever. The difference is he knew he was going to be a wrestler and be in the business, and he was just doing photography until that point, and which shortly before his 18th birthday came around. Whereas I was doing the photography, and I had no idea anybody would ever ask me to be in the wrestling business, and I was too scared to fucking volunteer the idea, but I don't want to be a wrestler anyway. So, but we both ultimately had the booking thing is what his true goal was. And because that was the influence of watching Lawler and Jarrett work. or, when he was coming to the matches with his father, Tommy. And I was just fascinated in the match, not to think anybody would ever let me do that either. But that was what fascinated me, that I thought, I could potentially do something like that and or manage. But that was our trajectory some way. He knew he was going to, and I never dreamed I would until I did, but we kind of did the same thing to get there.
Yeah, several 8x10s from clearly before he was like in the business, when he was just shooting photos. And yeah, now you know what? Because of Dark Side coming out, I'll put a bunch of that on Instagram, and maybe we'll talk about any of the letters in there on From the Files next week.
There you go.